It was a cool spring evening in March 1998 when 16-year-old Ryan Cooper stepped out of his family's home in the quiet Chicago suburb of Downers Grove. His mission couldn't have been simpler, just a quick walk down the street to grab a carton of eggs. He told his mom he'd be right back. He never returned. Somewhere between his front porch and the corner store, Ryan disappeared, without a witness, without a sound, and without a single trace. For his family, that night became the start of a lifelong search. This is the story of a boy who walked down a familiar street and vanished into mystery. Ryan Thomas Cooper was born on February 12, 1982, in Naperville, Illinois, a growing suburb west of Chicago, known for its tree-lined streets and family-friendly neighborhoods. His parents, David and Linda Cooper, were the kind of middle-class couple that defined 90s America. David worked long shifts as a mechanic for a trucking company, while Linda stayed home, balancing house chores with PTA meetings and endless school events. They lived in a modest split-level home on Greenwood Avenue, where Ryan and his younger sister, Emily, grew up surrounded by love, laughter, and the comfort of small-town normalcy. Ryan was the kind of kid everyone liked, polite, curious, and endlessly creative. His teachers said he had a knack for art and an unusual talent for cooking, something he'd picked up from watching his mom bake pies every Sunday. Every weekend, the kitchen would fill with the smell of cinnamon and vanilla as Ryan stood beside Linda, carefully measuring ingredients and asking questions about temperatures and textures. He took notes in a spiral-bound notebook, writing down every tip, every adjustment, every secret his mother shared. "You're going to be better than me someday," Linda would tell him, her hand resting on his shoulder. Ryan would just smile, flour dusting his nose, his eyes bright with possibility. But neither of them knew how dramatically their lives were about to change. At Lincoln Middle School, Ryan stood out, not for being loud or athletic, but for being kind. He was the kid who'd stay behind after class to help a teacher stack chairs or walk a classmate home if it was getting dark. During 7th grade, he'd befriended a boy named Marcus Chen, a quiet transfer student who struggled with English and had trouble making friends. Ryan ate lunch with him every day, helped him with homework, and introduced him to other kids. Marcus's parents were so grateful they invited the Cooper family over for dinner, a gesture that meant the world to them. "Ryan has a good heart," Marcus's father said that night. "He's going to do great things." David and Linda beamed with pride, watching their son help clear the table, completely unaware of how precious these ordinary moments truly were. By the time he entered Downers Grove South High School, he had already decided he wanted to become a pastry chef. He even kept a small notebook filled with recipes, sketches, and doodles of cake designs. His friends teased him about it sometimes, but Ryan never minded. He knew what he wanted, and that kind of quiet confidence made him stand out in a way that popularity never could. His home economics teacher, Mrs. Patricia Jennings, saw something special in him. She encouraged him to enter a regional baking competition during his sophomore year, and though Ryan was nervous, he agreed. He spent weeks perfecting a 3-layer chocolate cake with raspberry filling and cream cheese frosting. The night before the competition, he stayed up until 2 in the morning, piping delicate rosettes along the edges. He came in 3rd place, and when he brought the ribbon home, Linda cried, not because of the placement, but because she saw how happy he was, how alive. But what no one knew, not even Ryan himself, was that his journey would take an unexpected turn that would change everything. Sunday, March 15th, 1998, started like any other day in the Cooper household. The snow from the previous week had melted into slush, and the first hints of spring filled the cool Illinois air. Linda cooked her signature pot roast for dinner, while David watched the Bulls game in the living room. Michael Jordan was having one of his legendary seasons, and David couldn't help but shout at the television every time the Bulls scored. Ryan and Emily teased each other over dessert, their laughter echoing through the kitchen. Emily had accidentally spilled juice on Ryan's homework the night before, and he was still giving her a hard time about it. "You owe me," he said, grinning. "I'm thinking ice cream." "For a week." Emily rolled her eyes but laughed. "Fine, but only if you help me with my math." Ryan agreed, and they shook on it, their hands sticky from the apple pie Linda had made. It was such an ordinary moment, the kind families have 1,000 times without thinking. But for the Coopers, it would be the last completely normal moment they'd share for a very long time. After dinner, Ryan helped his dad wash the dishes, something he always did, a quiet ritual between father and son. They didn't talk much during these moments, just the clinking of plates and the sound of running water filling the comfortable silence. David would wash, Ryan would dry, and every so often David would nudge Ryan with his elbow, making him laugh. "You're getting good at this," David said that night, handing Ryan a dripping plate. "One day you'll have your own restaurant, and I'll be there every night, getting free dessert." Ryan smiled. "Deal. But you have to wash the dishes there too." David laughed, and for a brief, perfect moment, everything felt right. Around 8 o'clock in the evening, Ryan went upstairs to pack his school bag for Monday's home economics exam, carefully arranging his ingredients: flour, sugar, and butter. But when he opened the fridge, he noticed something missing. "Mom," he called out, "we're out of eggs." Linda, folding laundry on the couch, didn't think twice. "The 7-Eleven down on Maple's still open," she said. "Grab a dozen and come right back, okay?" Ryan nodded, slipped on his navy windbreaker, a pair of faded Levi's, and his favorite Nike Airs, then pocketed a crumpled $5 bill. He told his sister he'd be back in 10 minutes. Emily was sprawled on the living room floor, watching television. "Bring me back some candy," she said, not looking up. Ryan grabbed a pillow and tossed it at her head. "You're such a brat," he said, laughing. Emily threw the pillow back. "Takes one to know one." Those were the last words they ever exchanged. It was the last time anyone in the Cooper family saw Ryan. And in the years that followed, Linda would replay that moment over and over again, wondering if she said something different. If she'd told him to wait until morning, would her son have stayed home that night? She'd think about the $5 bill, the way he'd folded it twice before shoving it into his pocket. She'd think about his jacket, the navy windbreaker with the small tear on the left sleeve that she'd been meaning to sew but never got around to. She'd think about his shoes, the Nike Airs he'd begged for last Christmas, the ones that squeaked slightly when he walked. Every detail became precious. The walk from Greenwood Avenue to the 7-Eleven on Maple was short, 5, maybe 6 minutes tops. Ryan had walked that same route dozens of times. Streetlights flickered above, cars passed occasionally, and the night air carried the faint sound of traffic from nearby 355. It was one of those quiet, ordinary evenings where nothing unusual should ever happen. The neighborhood was safe, the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked and kids played in the streets until dusk. At around 8:40 in the evening, a neighbor, Mrs. O'Donnell, saw a boy she believed was Ryan walking past her driveway, hands in his pockets, his head slightly down. He seemed calm, unhurried. She almost called out to him, almost said hello, but decided against it. She'd seen Ryan walk by dozens of times before, and there was nothing unusual about this evening, nothing that made her think twice. That sighting would become the last confirmed moment anyone saw Ryan Cooper. He never made it to the store. When Ryan didn't return by 9:30, Linda started to worry. She called the 7-Eleven, but the cashier said no one matching Ryan's description had been there that night. David tried to reassure her. "He's probably at a friend's house," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. But when calls to classmates came up empty, concern began to grow. Linda's hands trembled as she dialed number after number, her voice growing more urgent with each call. "Have you seen Ryan? Did he stop by? Please, if you know anything." But no one had seen him. No one knew where he was. By 11 o'clock at night, David was driving through the neighborhood with his headlights sweeping through every alley and side street, calling Ryan's name. His voice echoed in the empty darkness. No sign, no jacket, no wallet, nothing. At 1 o'clock in the morning, they reported him missing at the Downers Grove Police Department. But just like so many cases in the 1990s, officers initially treated it as a possible runaway situation. "He's 16, one officer reportedly told Linda. "Give it 24 hours. Most teens come home on their own." Linda wanted to make them understand that Ryan wasn't like that he'd never just leave without telling them, that something felt terribly wrong, but all she could do was nod, tears streaming down her face, and hope they were right. But as the hours passed, that hope began to fade. And what the Coopers didn't know yet was that those first critical hours, the hours when quick action matters most, were slipping away. Every minute that passed took them further from answers. By Monday morning, the Coopers knew this was serious. Ryan's teachers confirmed he hadn't shown up for his exam. His friends hadn't heard from him, and his bike was still chained outside the house. Mrs. Jennings, his home economics teacher, called the Cooper house that afternoon. "I was worried when Ryan didn't show up," she said, her voice shaking. "He'd been so excited about this exam. He'd practiced for weeks. Is everything all right?" Linda couldn't answer. She just hung up the phone and broke down. Police finally began searching the route to the store, combing nearby Randall Park, the wooded lot behind Main Street Plaza, and drainage tunnels near Maple Avenue. Officers walked the streets with flashlights, peering into bushes, checking dumpsters, knocking on doors. Volunteers from the community joined the search, spreading out in groups, calling Ryan's name until their voices went hoarse. But there was nothing. No footprints, no signs of struggle, no discarded items. It was as if Ryan had simply stepped off the map. The only clue came from a local teenager who told detectives he'd seen someone who looked like Ryan talking to a man in a dark-colored pickup truck near the intersection of Maple and Dunham Road around 9 o'clock that night. The witness couldn't recall the license plate, and the man's face was obscured by shadows. "I didn't think much of it at the time," the boy said during his interview. "I just figured it was someone asking for directions or something, but now, I wish I'd paid more attention." Investigators followed the lead, canvassing auto repair shops and questioning vehicle owners in the area. They pulled records, cross-referenced vehicle registrations, interviewed dozens of truck owners. Nothing came of it. But that pickup truck would become a central focus of the investigation for years to come. It became a symbol of everything they didn't know, a dark shape lurking just out of reach. Meanwhile, the Cooper family turned their concern into action. They printed flyers, organized search parties, and appeared on local news stations. Linda's face became familiar to anyone who watched the evening news, her determined eyes pleading for information, for hope, for any lead that might bring Ryan home. David stood beside her, silent and resolute, his jaw set with determination. The case caught the attention of Chicago media, sparking brief regional coverage, but without new leads, it eventually faded from headlines. The world moved on. But the Coopers couldn't. David took time off work to search full-time, walking the streets until exhaustion forced him to rest. He wore through 3 pairs of shoes in the first 2 months, his soul splitting from the constant pavement. Linda barely slept, keeping Ryan's room exactly as he'd left it, his school bag still packed on his desk. She'd sit on his bed at night, holding his pillow, trying to hold on to something, anything that still felt like him. Emily, only 12 years old at the time, withdrew for weeks. She'd lost her big brother, her protector, her best friend, and the silence in the house became almost unbearable. Meals were eaten in quiet determination, the empty chair at the table a constant reminder of who was missing. Between 1998 and 2003, dozens of tips trickled in, but none led anywhere conclusive. Some claimed to have seen Ryan in nearby states like Indiana or Wisconsin. One woman believed she'd served him at a diner off Route 66. "He ordered pancakes," she told police. "I remember because he had such a sweet smile." But when investigators showed her a photo lineup, she couldn't definitively identify Ryan. Each lead was followed, and each one ultimately didn't pan out. A man in Iowa said he'd seen a boy matching Ryan's description working at a gas station. Police drove 6 hours to investigate, only to discover it was a case of mistaken identity. Another tip came from a trucker who claimed he'd given a ride to a hitchhiker near Joliet, and the young man had mentioned something about Downers Grove. That lead too went nowhere. By 2004, active investigation had slowed significantly. David Cooper, now retired, continued to walk the same streets every weekend, clutching a worn flyer with his son's photo. He'd tape them to telephone poles, hand them to strangers, leave them on car windshields. Most people didn't know what to say, but David didn't care. He had to keep searching. Linda joined a local support group for parents of missing children, finding solace in connecting with others who understood her particular struggle. They'd sit in a circle with other mothers and fathers who understood what it meant to live with unanswered questions. They'd hold hands, share stories, and support each other. But nothing could fill the emptiness. Detectives privately acknowledged that without new evidence, the case would be difficult to solve. But something else was happening behind the scenes, something the family wouldn't discover for more than a decade. On October 21st, 2016, nearly 2 decades after Ryan's disappearance, a mysterious voicemail arrived at the desk of the Chicago Tribune's crime desk. The caller's voice was distorted, shaking. "I know what happened to that boy from Downers Grove," the voice said. "He never made it to the store. Check the old water tower off Ogden Avenue." Then silence. The call lasted just 9 seconds. When police traced it, they found it had been made from a payphone outside a gas station in Aurora, about 20 miles away. Surveillance footage was too grainy to identify anyone. But the call sent shockwaves through the investigation. Who was making this claim? And why come forward now after all these years? Detectives reopened the case, launching a comprehensive search of the abandoned water tower site, which by then had been overgrown with weeds and fenced off for redevelopment. Search teams were brought in, and ground-penetrating technology was used to scan the area. Emily Cooper stood at the edge of the site, watching as crews methodically worked through the location, her heart filled with both hope and apprehension. She wanted answers. She needed closure. But when the search concluded 2 weeks later, nothing conclusive was found. Still, investigators believed the caller might have some insider knowledge, since the area mentioned was near Ryan's regular route. Forensic experts analyzed the recording, but technology couldn't match it to any known individual. The question haunted everyone involved. Who made that call, and why after all these years? Was it guilt? Someone's conscience finally speaking up? Or was it something else, perhaps someone playing a cruel game? In 2017, Linda Cooper passed away after a long battle with cancer. According to her daughter Emily, her final words were about finding Ryan. Emily held her mother's hand as she took her last breath, the weight of that hope settling on her shoulders. David passed 3 years later, in 2020, still wondering what became of his son. He went peacefully in his sleep, a worn photograph of Ryan near his bedside. Today, Emily, now in her late 30s, continues to search for answers. She has worked closely with Illinois cold case investigators, pushing for renewed testing of evidence collected in 1998, including fibers from a sweatshirt found near the 7-Eleven that same week. Unfortunately, results have been inconclusive so far. Despite the decades, the case continues to resonate in Downers Grove. Every March 15th, residents gather at Randall Park for a candlelight vigil, holding photos of a boy who never came home. His face, forever 16, still appears on community bulletin boards and social media pages dedicated to his case. Over the years, theories have developed. Some believe Ryan may have encountered someone with bad intentions that night. Others wonder if he might have been approached by someone online, though 1998 was still the early days of internet use. Detective John McAllister, who led the 2016 review, said something significant in an interview. "This case has unusual elements. Someone out there knows what happened, and we believe that person might eventually come forward." The FBI became briefly involved in 2018 after a series of similar Midwest disappearances were examined for patterns, but no definitive connection to Ryan's case was established. Today, the official status remains missing person. But there are details that continue to puzzle investigators. The dark-colored pickup truck seen near Maple and Dunham Road was never definitively identified, despite extensive searches of vehicle registration databases. The witness who reported it was a 17-year-old high school student who'd been skateboarding home that night. He described the truck as older, maybe from the 80s, with rust along the wheel wells. He said Ryan appeared to be talking to the driver, not showing distress, just talking. That detail troubled investigators. If Ryan had been taken against his will, surely there would have been some sign. But if he went voluntarily, did that mean he recognized the person? And if so, who could it have been? Another puzzling aspect involved Ryan's behavior in the days leading up to his disappearance. Several classmates later told police that Ryan had seemed distracted during the week before he vanished. One friend, a girl named Jessica Hoffman, said Ryan had mentioned something unusual during lunch on Friday, March 13th, just 2 days earlier. He said he felt like someone had been following him, Jessica recalled during her police interview. But when I asked who, he just shrugged it off and said he was probably being paranoid. Jessica had tried to press him for more details, but Ryan changed the subject, laughing it off as nothing serious. Now, years later, Jessica couldn't stop wondering if she should have pushed harder, if she should have told an adult. Investigators tried to follow up on this information, questioning other students and reviewing any suspicious activity reported in the area, but nothing concrete emerged. Was Ryan actually being watched? Or was it simply teenage worry, the kind that everyone experiences? Then there was the matter of a phone call Ryan made earlier that Sunday afternoon. Phone records showed that at 2:47 in the afternoon, Ryan had called a number registered to a payphone located outside a hardware store on Belmont Avenue, about 3 miles from his home. The call lasted 4 minutes. Police were never able to determine who Ryan spoke to or why he would call a payphone. David and Linda had no recollection of Ryan mentioning any plans that day, and none of his friends said they were at that location. It remains one of the most puzzling aspects of the case. Who was on the other end of that line, and did that conversation have anything to do with what happened later that night? Some investigators theorize that Ryan may have been planning to meet someone, but there was no evidence to confirm it. The hardware store had closed by 6 that evening, and no one remembered seeing a teenage boy using the phone. The 7-Eleven itself became a focal point of the investigation. The store manager, a man named Roger Tillman, was cooperative with police and provided security footage from that evening. The grainy black and white video showed the usual flow of customers, people buying cigarettes, lottery tickets, and late-night snacks. But Ryan never appeared on the tape. The timestamp on the footage confirmed that between 8:30 and 9:15 in the evening, no one matching Ryan's description entered or exited the store. The cashier working that night, a college student named Marcus Webb, was interviewed multiple times. He insisted he would have remembered Ryan if he'd come in, especially since the store was relatively quiet that evening. "I would have noticed a kid that age," Marcus said. "I'm always watching for younger customers." But no one like that came in. Marcus was eventually cleared of any involvement, but the question remained, if Ryan never made it to the store, what happened along the way? One theory that investigators explored was the possibility that Ryan had been approached somewhere along Maple Street, perhaps in one of the darker stretches between streetlights. Maple was a long, tree-lined road with several areas where visibility was poor, especially at night. If someone had been waiting, it might have been possible to approach Ryan without being easily seen. But this theory raised its own questions. If Ryan had been taken against his will, why were there no signs of disturbance? No marks on the pavement, no torn clothing, no witnesses who heard anything unusual. It was as if he'd simply stepped into another dimension. Detective McAllister revisited the scene multiple times, walking the route at the same time of night, trying to understand how someone could disappear so completely. There had to be a vehicle involved, he concluded. Someone pulled up, Ryan got in, and that was it. But why? What would make him get into a car? Another theory suggested Ryan may have accepted a ride from someone he knew. This would explain the lack of physical evidence and the absence of any signs of struggle. But if that were the case, who was the driver? David and Linda provided police with a list of everyone they could think of who Ryan might have trusted enough to get into a car with. Teachers, coaches, neighbors, family friends. Each person was interviewed and cleared. The investigation seemed to reach obstacles at every turn. "We've looked at so many possibilities," one detective admitted in a 2010 case review. "And we're still searching for that one piece that makes everything make sense." In 2005, a woman named Patricia Hendricks came forward with information that briefly renewed hope. Patricia, a resident of Downers Grove, said that on the night of March 15, 1998, she had been driving home from a friend's house and had seen a teenage boy standing on the corner of Maple and Ogden Avenue, looking uncertain. She said she'd slowed down to ask if he needed help, but he'd waved her off and started walking. Patricia could say for certain if the boy was Ryan. She'd only seen him for a few seconds, and it had been dark. But the timing and location were interesting. Police showed her a photo of Ryan, and she said it could have been him, though she wasn't completely sure. "I've thought about that night so many times," Patricia said. "I wish I'd stopped. I wish I'd insisted on making sure he was okay, but he seemed fine, so I just kept driving." Investigators canvassed the area again, searching for anyone else who might have been on that corner that night, but no additional witnesses came forward. Patricia's account remained unverified, another piece in an already complex puzzle. The anonymous phone call in 2016 changed the investigation's trajectory, at least temporarily. When the voice on the recording mentioned the old water tower off Ogden Avenue, investigators felt renewed energy. The site had historical significance. It had been an industrial area in the 1980s and early 90s, but by 1998 it was largely abandoned. Several businesses had closed, and the property had become overgrown with vegetation. It was the kind of place where something could be hidden without being easily noticed. The search operation was thorough. Specialized teams were brought in from multiple counties. Ground-penetrating technology was used to scan the soil. Equipment was deployed to examine areas where the scans had detected irregularities. But after 2 weeks of searching, nothing definitive was found. The disappointment was significant. Emily had allowed herself to hope that this might finally be the moment when her family got answers. But once again, they were left with questions. The lack of results didn't deter Emily Cooper. By this point, she had become the primary voice for her brother's case, giving interviews, maintaining a Facebook page dedicated to Ryan's memory, and working with cold case organizations across the country. She hired a private investigator named Tom Brennan, a retired Chicago police detective who specialized in missing persons cases. Tom reviewed every document, every interview transcript, every piece of evidence collected over the years. He re-interviewed witnesses, including Mrs. O'Donnell, who was now in her late 70s, but still remembered seeing Ryan that night. "He looked like he wasn't in any hurry," she told Tom, "just a kid walking down the street. I wish I'd said something to him, maybe asked where he was going, but you never think about those things in the moment. You never think it might be important." Tom also focused on the dark-colored pickup truck. He obtained vehicle registration records from the Illinois Secretary of State's office and cross-referenced them with known addresses in the Downers Grove area. He identified over 200 vehicles that matched the general description: older model trucks, dark in color, registered between 1995 and 1998. He began the careful process of tracking down each owner, interviewing those who were available, and locating family members of those who had passed. It was slow, methodical work, but Tom believed that the truck might be key. "Someone drove that truck," he said in an interview, "and someone might have seen Ryan near it. We just have to find that person." One name that came up during Tom's investigation was a man named Gerald Voss. Gerald had lived in Downers Grove in the late 1990s and owned a dark green Chevrolet pickup truck that matched the witness's description. He worked as a contractor, doing odd jobs around the neighborhood, and several residents remembered seeing his truck parked on various streets, including Maple Avenue. When police initially questioned Gerald in 1998, he said he'd been home all evening on March 15th, watching television. His wife at the time supported his account, but in 2017, Tom discovered something interesting. Gerald's wife had filed for divorce in 2003, and in the proceedings, she made statements to her attorney suggesting Gerald had been difficult to live with and that she'd felt uncomfortable around him at times. Tom managed to track down Gerald's ex-wife, now remarried and living in Wisconsin. She agreed to speak with him, though she seemed hesitant. "I don't know if Gerald had anything to do with that boy's disappearance," she said carefully, "but he had a temper, and he didn't like being questioned. When the police came to our house back then, he got really upset afterwards, said they were bothering him. I remember thinking it was an unusual reaction. Most people would want to help, wouldn't they?" Tom tried to locate Gerald Voss, but he'd moved multiple times since the late 1990s and had become difficult to trace. Last known records placed him in southern Illinois, but he hadn't been particularly active in any public records for over a decade. It was as if he'd simply faded from view. Emily Cooper urged police to look more closely into Gerald's background, but without concrete evidence, there was little they could do officially. "We need proof to take action," Detective McAllister explained, "and right now, we don't have enough." The case took another intriguing turn in 2019, when a hiker named Ben Torres discovered something unusual while exploring a wooded area near the old water tower site. Partially buried beneath leaves and dirt, Ben found a small, weathered metal box. Inside was a collection of items: a tarnished silver ring, a faded Polaroid photograph, and a handwritten note. The photograph showed a teenage boy standing in front of a house, smiling at the camera. The boy looked somewhat similar to Ryan, but the photo was too deteriorated to make a certain identification. The note, written in faint pencil, read, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to happen. It was unsigned." Ben immediately contacted the police, and the items were sent to the Illinois State Crime Lab for analysis. Testing on the ring and note came back inconclusive. Years of exposure to the elements had degraded any biological material. The photograph was examined by forensic imaging experts who concluded that while the boy in the photo bore a resemblance to Ryan, they couldn't definitively confirm it was him. The handwriting on the note was compared to samples from persons of interest, but no matches were found. Emily believed the items might be connected to her brother's case. "That note suggests someone knows something," she said in a media interview. "Someone left those things there for a reason. We need to understand why." But without more concrete evidence, the discovery remained another unanswered question in a case already full of them. As the years passed, the emotional impact on the Cooper family became increasingly apparent. Emily struggled with the ongoing uncertainty, haunted by the unresolved nature of her brother's disappearance. She attended therapy, joined support groups, and channeled her energy into advocacy work, speaking at events for families of missing persons. "People don't always understand what it's like to live with unanswered questions," she said. "Every time the phone rings, every time there's unexpected news, you wonder if this might be the moment you finally learn something. But usually it's just regular life continuing, and you're left with the same questions you've always had." Emily's own children, now teenagers themselves, grew up knowing the story of the uncle they never met. She showed them photos, told them stories, made sure Ryan's memory stayed alive in their family. But she also carried concerns, a heightened awareness about safety that sometimes made her more protective than other parents. It affected her relationships and her daily life, but she couldn't help it. She'd already experienced one devastating loss. She couldn't imagine going through that again. In 2021, Emily made a public appeal on social media, asking anyone with information about her brother's case to come forward. The post gained significant attention, garnering over 50,000 shares and hundreds of comments. Several people claimed to have new information, but most of the tips were difficult to verify or didn't lead anywhere specific. One message, however, caught attention. It came from a woman who identified herself only as M. She claimed that her late father had known something about Ryan's disappearance but had been reluctant to speak about it. "He used to have troubled sleep," M wrote. "He'd wake up at night saying things like, 'I should have said something,' and 'it wasn't supposed to go that way.' When I asked him what he meant, he'd become quiet and wouldn't discuss it. He passed away in 2019, and I've been wondering about this ever since. I don't know if he was involved or if he just knew something, but I thought someone should look into it." M provided the name of her father, a man named Carl Dietrich, who had lived in Downers Grove in the late 1990s and worked as a truck driver. Police investigated Carl's background and discovered that he'd been briefly questioned during the initial investigation in 1998, but had provided an alibi. His work records showed he'd been traveling on the night of March 15th. Without additional evidence, this information didn't lead to any breakthroughs. But it added another dimension to the mystery. How many people might know something about what happened to Ryan? And what would it take for them to share that information? What happened to Ryan Cooper between his front porch and the corner store remains one of Illinois' most enduring unsolved mysteries. He wasn't running away. He wasn't being reckless. He was just a teenager who needed eggs for a school project. Every missing person case affects not just the individual, but everyone who cares about them. Ryan's story reminds us how quickly circumstances can change, how a simple errand can become something completely unexpected, and how, even decades later, families continue to search for answers. If you have any information about the disappearance of Ryan Cooper, please contact the Downers Grove Police Department or the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, because somewhere someone knows what happened that night. And that information could finally bring resolution to a family that has been searching for almost 3 decades. The hope is that one day the pieces of this puzzle will finally come together and the Cooper family will have the answers they've been seeking for so long. But here's what keeps investigators awake at night. Here's what doesn't add up. Ryan Cooper was a responsible kid. He'd walked that route dozens of times. He knew the neighborhood. He knew the rules. So why, on that particular night, did everything go wrong? Was it pure chance? Or was someone waiting? Someone who knew his routine. Someone who'd been watching. Think about this for a moment. The mysterious phone call Ryan made that afternoon to a payphone 3 miles away. 4 minutes of conversation with someone we still can't identify. Then just hours later, he disappears on a simple errand. Coincidence? Or connection? And what about that dark pickup truck? The witness said Ryan was talking to the driver, not running, not afraid, just talking. Like he knew them. So who was behind that wheel? A neighbor? A family friend? Someone from school? The list of people Ryan would willingly approach was small. Very small. And here's the detail that haunts Emily Cooper to this day. When police searched Ryan's room after his disappearance, they found his recipe notebook open on his desk, the page he'd been working on, a detailed sketch of a 3-layer cake design with notes in the margins. But there was something else. At the bottom of the page, in Ryan's handwriting, were 3 words that made no sense to anyone. 3 words that seemed completely out of place. Tuesday, blue truck. Maple police questioned Emily, Linda, and David about this note. None of them knew what it meant. Tuesday would have been March 17th, 2 days after Ryan disappeared. Blue truck? The witness had described a dark-colored truck, possibly green or black, but never blue. And Maple? That was the street where Ryan was last seen. Was Ryan planning to meet someone on Tuesday? Was this note about a different arrangement entirely? Or had he written down something he'd seen, something that worried him? We'll never know, because Ryan never made it to Tuesday. Detective McAllister has a theory, one he's shared in recent interviews. I think Ryan knew something was going to happen, he said. I think in those final days, he sensed danger. Maybe he couldn't articulate it. Maybe he didn't want to worry his parents. But that note, that mysterious phone call, the feeling of being followed that he mentioned to his friend Jessica, these weren't random. Ryan was trying to figure something out, and I think whatever he discovered got him into trouble. But there's more to this story, something that's never been fully explained. 3 weeks after Ryan's disappearance, Linda Cooper received a piece of mail that chilled her to the bone. It was a postcard, no message, no signature, just a picture of the Chicago skyline at night. The postmark, Aurora, Illinois, the same town where that anonymous call would come from 18 years later. Police tested the postcard for fingerprints, for DNA, for any trace evidence. Nothing usable was found, but Linda kept that postcard. She carried it in her purse every single day until she passed away. Someone sent this, she would say. Someone who knew. Someone who wanted me to know they were thinking about us. Or maybe someone who wanted to torment us. I don't know which is worse. So let me ask you something. What do you think happened to Ryan Cooper? Do you believe he was taken by a stranger? Or do you think he knew his abductor? Do you think that phone call he made that afternoon was connected? What about the note in his notebook, Tuesday? Blue truck, Maple, does that mean anything to you? And the postcard? Was that sent by the same person who made the anonymous call in 2016? Someone out there knows the answers to these questions. Maybe it's someone watching this right now. Maybe you know something, saw something, heard something back in 1998 that didn't seem important at the time. A truck that didn't belong in the neighborhood. A person acting strangely. A conversation that felt off. Emily Cooper believes that the truth is still out there. Someone knows, she says. Maybe they're scared. Maybe they think too much time has passed. Maybe they think no one cares anymore. But I'm telling you, we care. I care. Every single day I wake up wondering where my brother is. Every single day I think about that last moment, when he grabbed a pillow and threw it at me, when he called me a brat and I called him one back. I'd give anything to have that moment again, to tell him I love him, to tell him to stay home, but I can't. So the only thing I can do is keep searching, keep asking, keep hoping that someone will finally speak up. The Downers Grove Police Department has a tip line dedicated to Ryan's case. It's still active, it's still monitored, and they take every single call seriously. If you know anything at all, please reach out. You can remain anonymous. You don't have to give your name. You just have to give truth. Because somewhere out there, Ryan Cooper deserves justice, and the Cooper family deserves peace. But I want to hear from you. What's your theory? What do you think happened that night? Do you think Ryan is still alive somewhere, living under a different name? Do you think he met with foul play? Do you think the anonymous caller in 2016 was telling the truth? Or were they trying to mislead investigators? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Let's discuss this case. Let's keep Ryan's story alive. Because the moment we stop talking about cases like this, the moment we stop asking questions, is the moment the truth gets buried forever. And if this case moved you, if Ryan's story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to this channel. We cover cold cases, missing persons, and unsolved mysteries because these stories matter. These aren't just statistics. These are real people, real families, real lives that were changed in an instant. By subscribing, you're helping us keep these stories in the public eye. You're helping families like the Coopers find the answers they've been searching for. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and let's solve these mysteries together. Remember, every unsolved case is a puzzle waiting to be completed, and sometimes all it takes is one person, one memory, one detail to bring everything into focus. Could you be that person? Could you have the missing piece? Think about it. Really think about it. And if something comes to mind, don't hesitate. Reach out, speak up. Be the voice that finally brings Ryan Cooper home. This is a case that has haunted a community for nearly 3 decades. But it doesn't have to stay unsolved. Not if we work together. Not if we refuse to forget. Ryan Thomas Cooper, born February 12, 1982. Last seen March 15, 1998. 16 years old. Navy windbreaker, faded Levi's, Nike Air shoes, brown hair, hazel eyes, a smile that lit up every room he entered. A dream of becoming a pastry chef, a life full of promise, a family that never stopped searching. Let's bring Ryan home. Let's give the Cooper family the answers they deserve. Let's make sure that no case, no matter how old, is ever truly forgotten. Drop your theories below, share this video, subscribe, and let's solve this mystery together. Because someone out there knows what happened on that cool spring evening in March 1998, and it's time for them to speak.